Today, we're looking at a red ink by Herbin Rouge Opera. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps in the description down below, so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews every single day, so I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into the Nimicine Fission with a broad nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. For the first writing sample, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. There is an additional writing sample that'll happen later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it is offering us some bits of shading within the writing. 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows us no color variation. We didn't get any. The medium shows us none, and we did get some. Tomoe River. No bleeding. Minor Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 14 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 20 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get any. And Rhodia, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. Medium is just a tad darker than the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it does offer some shading. Look at lazy and brown, very different tones. It's not shading within the writing like in and out of letters, but entire words are different tones. 14 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both does show a tiny bit of color variation, although it only really shows up in the medium. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that this is pushing its way up, lighter, moving darker as it moves up and gathers towards the top. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and we very clearly see a line that's formed on the bottom. Then there's a slight break where the water pushed the ink past the line and it all moved up. It does give you the idea that it might want to be a little resistant. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, there is no way that I would use this in a note-taking situation if I wanted to be able to go back and highlight. Now, water is lifting all the darkest tones, but what's staying on the paper is that line from the second chromatography, which is very odd. We've seen it with a couple of Herbins, and this is one where that happened again. But water is all that it took to get this out of my pen. Pen flush is doing a little bit more than what water did. It started to really break down the ink that's in the paper, but we're not fully getting white coming through on the paper yet. The 1/3 bleach solution completely removes it, but it also stained the paper yellow a little bit. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Now I'm going to link the video that shows how I do my testing and calculations. Herbin Rouge Opera has a viscosity of 1.98, making it a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Herbin's Rouge Opera has an average dry time of 13 seconds, putting it right on the edge of normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Herbin's Rouge Opera, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. So I went with a nice turquoise. The Atramentis Mint Turquoise, to be exact. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, P. Berger, and white lines paper. Here we're looking at the yellow Rhodia paper, not looking at performance, more looking at the tone change that goes on with this ink, because what we get is, like on the stub, it's the same. But on the extra fine, it looks just a little bit lighter a tone, just a hair lighter. Now the medium looks the same. Largely you can say that this isn't going to be tremendously changed. When we look at the scrubby, the extra fine certainly looks darker. So does the medium. So we do see some tone change for this ink being a little translucent. This is P. Berger, a French rule student grade paper. Lots of bleeding that's occurring, not touching the page underneath, but not letting you use the back of the page because of the amount of ghosting. Not as bad with the medium, almost none with the, or not as bad with the extra fine, almost none on the medium. The 1.1 has feathering in the word rouge, in the J, in the opera. A lot of feathering. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade, 2 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade, 3 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both aren't showing us any color variation, and we didn't get any. And last up is white lines paper, which has bleeding that's occurring on the stub, on the extra fine, not getting through and touching the page underneath. The stub would probably stop you from using the back or the back of the page. Whew, words. Extra fine has some ghosting as a result, but I don't think it would stop you from using the back of the page with the extra fine. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a lot lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 3 seconds to dry. Medium is just a shade darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the medium does show a little color variation, the extra fine shows none, but we really didn't get any in the writing, and that's all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Herbin's Rouge Opera? This is a very solid performing, well-behaved red ink. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? That's really a dealer's choice, depending on how dark you would prefer your red to be. A drier pen puts down a lighter tone, and a much wetter pen a much darker tone. If you've made it this far, and according to my analytics, 50% of you aren't, and you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.